Nkiru raced after the men who were mocking her and calling her names because she was fat. She pursued them with all her strength until she eventually got hold of Ifeanyi, who was slower than the rest. He lifted him up and threw him to the ground. Then he sat on him and started punching him on the face. Ifeanyi was helpless because Nkiru was very fat and he didn't have the strength to push her away from him. As Nkiru continued punching him on the face, she screamed at him, "Don't you ever call me that name again. My name is Nkiru and not Iburibu." Suddenly, she stopped punching Ifeanyi when she saw how weak and scared he was. She stood up and watched as Ifeanyi ran away quickly to meet his friend with the little strength he had left. Nkiru looked around and saw that a lot of villagers had already gathered at the scene, watching her beat Ifeanyi like a child. She could see the fear on her faces and she felt very ashamed. She remembered the words of her father and mother. "If you continue like this, you would never find a husband in this village. Which man would want to marry such a violent and brash woman?" her father said. As the words of her parents echoed in her thoughts, tears started dropping from her eyes and she ran away from the villagers into the forest to hide. When she got to the forest, she sat at the foot of a tree and started to think about her beautiful past before everything became very embarrassing and bad for her. 21 years ago, when Nkiru was born, all the villagers loved and adored her. She was so gorgeous and very chubby. All the girls in the village loved Nkiru as a baby and would often fight to carry her in their arms. They loved her full cheeks and soft chubby body and would often poke her full cheeks. But as Nkiru grew older, the villagers that once admired and loved her started to change towards her. Her chubbiness turned into fat, and the compliments of the villagers gradually turned into ridicule and mockery. As she grew into a teenager and got enrolled into the community primary school, her peers and other teenagers would often tease her and make fun of her body. They started bullying her and making her feel bad and horrible about herself. They gave her a nickname called Iburibu, which meant fatty. Nkiru had no friends because none of her peers wanted to associate with her. Whenever she walked down the streets of the village, little children and her peers would laugh at her and point fingers at her as she passed by. Iburibu is passing by. No wonder the whole earth is shaking. They would say things like this to her hearing and start laughing at her. Nkiru was very hot and she was always ashamed of her body. She wondered how the same people who adored her in the past suddenly became hostile and brash towards her. One fateful evening, Nkiru was having dinner with her mother, father and baby sister. After she had finished the portion of food given to her, Nkiru stood up from where she sat to go and get more because she wasn't satisfied. Suddenly, she heard her father's thunderous voice. "All you do is eat and eat. Look at your little sister. Can't you see how slim and beautiful she is? But all you do is eat and get fat without control. I wonder which man would marry a woman as fat and gluttonous as you." Nkiru froze where she stood. She couldn't believe her ears. She burst out in tears and ran into her room. She expected her mother to say something, but her mother remained where she sat as if she was in full support of what her father said, and this made Nkiru to be hurt the more. She wept and wept until the pain inside her started to grow into hatred and anger for everyone. The next day, Nkiru decided that she would do whatever it takes to lose weight. She stopped eating and started starving herself. She started engaging in exercises and doing things to help her go down in size. But no matter how hard she tried, her weight and size remained the same. When people saw her making efforts to cut down in size, instead of encouraging her, they would laugh at her and scorn her. As each day went by, Nkiru grew angrier and angrier. The more the villagers insulted her, the more fierce and provoked she became. Like a fire burning hot within her heart, she carried this pain and hurt in her heart until she became an adult, and this made her get angry easily. One hot afternoon, Nkiru was on her way back from the market when she saw some men standing on the path which led to her house. They stood and watched as she passed, and then they started making fun of her. I almost thought an elephant was passing by. Please take it easy before you push down all the trees in our small village. Iburibu, I'm sure you can finish a whole cow by yourself. Then they started laughing. Nkiru tried to ignore their words, but the moment she was called Iburibu, she couldn't bear the anger and pain anymore. She kept what she went to the market to buy and raced after the three men with all her might. They ran and ran, but Ifeanyi was unfortunately apprehended by Nkiru, who threw him to the ground. She sat on him and started punching him in the face as she screamed at him. Don't you ever call me that name again. My name is Nkiru and not Iburibu. Suddenly, she stopped when she saw how helpless and scared Ifeanyi was. His nose was bleeding and her knuckles were bruised. She stood up and watched him run away in fear and pain to meet his friends. Then she looked up at the villagers who had gathered in such a short while to witness everything. Nkiru picked up what she went to buy at the market and started walking home in shame. The words of her father and mother rang in her thoughts once again, bringing tears to her eyes. She felt like taking her own life. As Nkiru walked down the path which led to her home, people who saw her pointed at her and whispered, "Avoid her, she's a man-beater." This broke Nkiru's heart the most. As she continued down the path to her house, she heard some noise inside the bush. She was scared at first, but she decided to venture into the bush and find out where the sound was coming from. It sounded like the cry of a woman in pain and distress. Nkiru followed the path steadily until she arrived at an opening inside the forest. She was shocked when she saw a young girl inside the forest, surrounded by three men who were trying to rape her. Nkiru charged at the men in rage and anger. She picked up a big stick and beat them all until they ran away for their dear lives. Then she went to meet the young lady where she was sitting down helplessly in tears. "Thank you for saving my life. I didn't know what I would have done if you haven't shown up." "You are welcome. But who are you and how did you end up inside this forest?" Nkiru asked her. "My name is Amanda. I was playing hide and seek with my friends when I got lost and couldn't find my way back. It was then that I met these men who promised they knew the way back to Anana village where I was from. I didn't know they were kidnappers. We walked and walked for days until we got to this forest. When I realized that they were kidnappers and tried to run away, they subdued me and tried to have their way with me." Nkiru felt very bad for Amanda. She knew Amanda's village, but she felt reluctant to take her home because she was just returning from the market and she knew her parents would be waiting for her at home. Amanda went on her knees and pleaded with Nkiru. "Please, take me back to Anana village. I promise you that my parents will compensate you greatly if you take me back home safely." Nkiru thought deep and hard about everything. She recalled the harsh word of ridicule that even her parents often told her at home. She also remembered the constant bullying from villagers and how no one wanted to be her friend. After thinking for a while, she decided to take Amanda home. Anana village was just 2 days' walk from where they were, so she decided that they would feed on the things she got from the market until they arrived at the village. The both of them walked for days until they arrived on the path which led directly to Anana village. A farmer saw Amanda walking with Nkiru and quickly ran out to meet her. "Where have you been? What happened to you?" the farmer asked impatiently. He was very happy to see Amanda. As he led them to Amanda's residence, the other farmers and villagers followed behind, dancing and jubilating in joy that Amanda had returned safely after so many days. When they got to Amanda's compound, her father and brother called Nnamdi came out with tears of joy to welcome them. They embraced Amanda and broke down in tears because they felt she wouldn't be found anymore since they have been searching for her all over the forest. They thanked Nkiru for bringing her back home safely and gave her a room in their house to rest. A party was held that night to celebrate the return of Amanda, and everyone ate and drank to their fill. The next day, when Nkiru woke up, she instantly recalled her previous experiences and felt ashamed to come out of the room. She didn't want anyone to call her fat or look at her in an awkward way. She sat and thought about what to do. Someone knocked on her door. She stood up to answer the door and saw a young woman of almost the same age and size as her. The woman introduced herself as Nneka. Nneka was very beautiful, despite the fact that she was the same size as Nkiru. Unlike Nkiru, who was ashamed of herself, Nneka boldly displayed her body. She had a very beautiful and long hair. Her jewelry and her attire were also very beautiful. She looked like a princess. Please join us at the table for breakfast. Amanda's father asked me to invite you, the young lady said to Nkiru, but she could see the worry on Nkiru's face. What is the problem? Nneka asked her, looking concerned. Nkiru invited her inside the room, and together they sat on the bed. After taking a deep breath, Nkiru told her, I am fat. I am scared that everyone would hate and dislike me. Nneka became very surprised at Nkiru's word. She was shocked that Nkiru was ashamed of her size. She moved closer to Nkiru and told her, why would you be ashamed of your size? Do I look any different from you? Nneka stood up and gave Nkiru a twirl, then sat on the bed with her once again and told her, don't let the words of anyone discourage you or make you feel less of yourself. Everyone is beautiful in their own way. What matters isn't what people think about you, but what you think about yourself. Now stand up. I'll help you get dressed. Nneka waited for Nkiru to have her bath, and when she was done, Nkiru sat in front of a mirror while Nneka helped her with her facial decorations. Then Nneka went to the wardrobe and selected a beautiful gown for Nkiru and a nice shoe to match. When she was done fixing Nkiru up, she looked so beautiful and adorable. Nkiru couldn't recognize herself when she looked at herself in the mirror. She was amazed at how gorgeous she looked, and she thanked Nneka. Then they went out for breakfast. Immediately she stepped outside the room, everyone in their house couldn't take their eyes off Nkiru. She was so beautiful that her presence captivated the attention of everyone in the house. Nnamdi, Amanda's brother, admired Nkiru's beauty and couldn't take his eyes off her when they were having breakfast that morning. He kept looking at her until they were done. Later that day, Nkiru walked around the village of Anana with grace and poise. She was surprised to see that most of the ladies in Anana were fat, yet they were very beautiful and appreciated. She admired the way people looked at her, and her self-esteem was elevated. In the evening, Nkiru was seated outside the house when Nnamdi approached her. He thanked her once again for saving his sister and also told her that he had fallen in love with her. Will you be my wife? He asked her. Nkiru was surprised at his sudden proposal. It felt too soon and took her unawares. Nnamdi was very tall and handsome. It felt so surreal that someone as desirable as Nnamdi would ask her to marry him. Because back in her own village, everyone avoided her like a plague and would often make mockery of her stature. Nkiru wasted no time in accepting to marry Nnamdi because he appeared to be a gentleman. However, Nkiru still felt insecure. She knew she had to travel back to see her parents after the marriage, and the thought of what she might experience in her village made her very sad. One fateful evening, when she was seated outside the compound, thinking about her past with a sad face. Nnamdi approached her and sat beside her. He asked her, "My angel, why are you sad? Don't you want to marry me? Are you not happy here?" Nkiru took a deep breath and told Nnamdi all she went through in her village before she met Amanda. "I don't want to be fat anymore. I'm tired of people insulting and mocking me," Nkiru said. Nnamdi hugged her and said, "I loved you because of your personality. You are a very beautiful person inside out. You don't have to worry about impressing the world or what people will say. You are perfect the way you are." Nkiru thanked Nnamdi for his words of encouragement, and she stopped feeling insecure about her shape and size. Nnamdi treated her like a queen and never gave her a reason to believe that she was unattractive. On their wedding day, a feast was held, and Nneka, who was now Nkiru's friend, helped her look as beautiful as a goddess. The whole village of Anana admired her appearance, and many of them wished Nkiru was their own bride. A few days after the wedding, Nnamdi and his new wife Nkiru went on a journey to see her parents. When they got to Nkiru's village, no one could recognize her anymore. She looked so adorable and gorgeous despite the fact that she was fat. All the men who had previously ridiculed her admired her like a queen. When she got to her parents' house, she met her father seated in front of the house while her mother was cooking at the corner in the compound. They both didn't recognize her until she spoke. "Papa, good afternoon. It's your daughter Nkiru." Her father couldn't believe his eyes. He called on Nkiru's mother, who came running to where they were. They hugged her and broke down in tears. Nkiru's mother apologized for the way they treated her. "We all thought you were dead. Please forgive us." Nkiru was surprised that her parents could be so worried about her. She told them that she had forgiven them and introduced Nnamdi to them as her husband. They were all very happy and also very surprised that Nkiru was married to such a tall and handsome man, while her sister, whom they praised for her shape and beauty, was yet to find a worthy husband. Nnamdi presented the gifts that they bought for them and told them how Nkiru had saved his sister Amanda from being raped. They all welcomed Nnamdi as a part of their family. The next day, Nkiru went back to the village of Anana with her husband. She gave birth to beautiful children and lived happily ever with Nnamdi in Anana village. The moral lesson of this story reminds us that we are beautiful in our own way. Don't let the words of others ruin or reduce your self-esteem. A man or woman who loves you wouldn't discriminate against you or force you to change who you are just to please them. Don't be discouraged by the words of other people. If you find yourself in an environment where you are not appreciated, make efforts to leave. As a parent, it is not proper to show favoritism, showing more love to one child over the other. It would breed hatred among the siblings. Most humans are like chameleons. The same people who praise you when you are rich would be the same people who ridicule you when you become poor. Be mindful of who you trust.